Thank you very much indeed for that. Look, I'm conscious of the irony of being the first speaker and being male at an event which is associated with International Women's Week, as it should be. And I had thought of doing a Daniel Craig, and whether you were conscious of the fact that he appeared in drag earlier this week on International Women's Day, actually in an advert which was very powerful and was very, very good. Judi Dench was reciting all the respects in which women, even in our advanced democracies, still lag far behind, are still discriminated against, that the structural prejudice against the possibilities for women in society remain very profound. He comes on looking like 007, actually with rather a bad tie, and then he appears much better dressed with a blonde wig afterwards, and takes the blonde wig off during the course of the recitation of these difficulties and deficits that women still face in our society. And it's fascinating. You can see it on YouTube. Just put Daniel Craig drag, and there you see it. It's a very powerful advert, in fact, and a good one to have been put out on that day. And as I listened to it, as I listened to this recital of these problems that still face women in our best and most advanced liberal democracies today, I reflected on the fact that all those difficulties, all those barriers for women in society have their roots, and this is just a plain historical fact. It always sounds like a tendentious and polemical, critical, hostile, militant remark to make, but it is just a plain historical fact that the roots lie in religion. All the major religions of the world have embodied in them as deep ideological features, attitudes towards women, towards their place in society, towards their role, towards their subordinate status to men, their ancillary status, their status as servants, in fact, of children and men. And it's been hugely difficult, even in more advanced and wealthy societies, to overcome these barriers. And they're familiar, they hardly need reciting, they hardly need reminding. But in order to achieve the victory of a change of mind, which is what our task is now, to persuade people to think differently, to take a different attitude towards these matters, we have to get them to understand why they persist and why they exist in the first instance. And this is a task for the historians. And we are all of us should be at any rate historians in this respect, to point out to people why these things happened in the past, what the logic, such as it was of this, and how it is that they've become institutionalized, built into the very fabric of the institutions of our societies. All the religions are like this, and unfortunately, of course, over time, many women themselves, because it's always the case that victims of institutional prejudice can, at least a proportion of them can, become collaborators with the process. So you will hear women saying in all the major religions, women in the southern states of the United States of America, married and bringing up children in evangelical, born-again, Bible-believing families, that their status is a privileged one, that they're protected by their religion, that they're advantaged by the place that they have in the Pauline view of what women should be and do. You will hear this from women in Islam who say that they cherish the veil of the hijab, that they cherish the position that their religion has given them in society. They feel protected by it. And when those attitudes are replicated, taught to daughters and continued through a society, it remains hard for the bigger task of explaining why these are genuine barriers and how important it is that those barriers ought to be torn down by an understanding of history. In the Middle East today, female literacy is only 47%. And while that is the case, there is a built-in deficit to the possibility of advance in those societies. The United Nations has produced a number of reports on female literacy and numeracy in Africa, and they make astonishing reading, because even the most basic education for women in Africa transforms their lives. They have fewer children, their children are healthier, they get access to their rights and to social goods, that they're able to manage their lives better, they're able to make serious choices that are really fundamental to their welfare. For example, there are some parts of Africa where women are not allowed to own property. They are property, and they're passed as property from fathers to husbands. And if the husband dies of AIDS, having infected them with AIDS, they just pass to another person with AIDS. Whereas in those parts of Africa where women can own property, they can have some independence. They can bring up their children as widows if they are widows, or they can refuse to be handed around as chattels and goods. And these really rather simple structural features in a society are transforming as to the possibilities for the lives of women. And I help, in fact, to run a small school in a part of Africa. And some years ago, I was very enthusiastic about the idea of it being a girls' school to try to do some positive discrimination in that area. And I was told by somebody who knows the situation in Africa very well that that would have been a terrible mistake to start a girls-only school, because the boys and men in the area would have resented them and would have given them a much harder time, and that it was therefore very important that there should be a co-educational school, and indeed it is. This school is now. But this person said to me, children in rural areas in Africa begin their education very late, around about the age of 8 or 9 in some cases, and in many parts of Africa, puberty sets in very early for girls, and therefore the most important thing that one could do if one is starting a school is to make sure that there is a toilet with a door, because otherwise the girls, after a year or two of school, can't continue to go to school if they can't look after their personal hygiene properly. And this was something that never occurred to me. I mean, it would never occur to me to think about loos for women, you know. Architects, most of them have been men. That's why there are queues outside the ladies at the Opera House, no queues outside the gents, because it doesn't occur to them to think of how differently disposed we are in some respects. And it certainly would never have occurred to me that the key to education in Africa is a toilet with a door. And it's that kind of thinking, it's that realization that if you are going to try to change the structures, change the institution, change the thinking, make it really possible to empower people and give them the opportunities to develop, that one should be imaginative, that one should look at history, that one should conduct the argument relentlessly, that there is absolutely no justification whatever for these inequalities to persist. They are the legacy of history, and they are almost exclusively the legacy of religious history. And we have to interrogate that. We have to go and talk to people in our own contemporary society today, in this country, where tranches of Anglicans are furious at the thought of women bishops. I mean, where are we? The fact that some of our minds in our contemporary world are still in medieval times is a serious problem for us, because it's massively disadvantageous. Personally, I'm not keen on bishops in general, and therefore I'm not all that keen on women bishops either, but I think that while we have institutions in society, they should be open to everybody. Everybody should have that chance. And it is terribly dismaying to see newspapers, television discussions, the public at large, spectating and accepting that there are large numbers of people who want to stop women having access to certain roles in our society, as if somehow or other that were normal. It isn't, and we shouldn't allow it to be. And so I just want to say that in this particular instance, this campaign, One Law for All, is crucial. This is one of the pressure points. The thought that Sharia law is in fact already operating in various communities in our society, and that Sharia law has a deeply rooted institutional bias against women is a scandal. And I have such admiration for Mariam and Pervez and all the people who are doing this work to alert our society to the danger that's involved here, and to fight a campaign at their own personal risk, really considerable risk that they run in doing this. I think it's massively admirable. I really do take my hat off to them, and I thank them for this day and for all the things that they have done, and I hope that we will all continue to support them as vigorously as we have in the past. Many thanks to you.